Radio Talk Online with your host, Melanie Fine.
This is Melanie Fine at Radio Talk Online. Today we're talking with Jim Brock, a broker associate at Tarbell Realtors. Welcome, Jim.
Hello, Melanie. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. So we're going to talk today about your experience in the real estate business. How did you get started?
Well, I retired here to the desert in 2001. Discovered I couldn't play enough golf to stay busy, and so I decided to get into real estate. I'd bought and sold homes all of my life, and something I always enjoyed, the whole process of looking for a home, finding the right home, negotiating an offer. And so it was something I thought I would enjoy, and it's proven correct. I have enjoyed it. I've been doing it since 2006 on a full-time basis.
Wonderful. And what aspect of real estate do you specialize in?
I specialize in country club communities here in the desert, behind the gates. These are primarily second home communities. So, purchase is discretionary, and frankly, it's been a rough market since 2006. With the economy, buyers, a second home has not been at the top of their wish list, or maybe still at the top of the wish list, but it's not something people have been buying. That is changing. We're seeing an improvement in the market, I'm happy to say. Sales year over year are up. Prices year to year are up. So the market's changing. Inventories are tightening, and things are looking up in this business.
So you think we've seen the bottom?
I can tell you we have, at least in the areas where I sell here in Central Palm Desert, Rancho Mirage. Bottom was about 2011. And since then, last year, we were up about, in this type of community, up about 5%. This year to date, over last year, another 6%. So prices are definitely on the way up.
Now, a significant amount of the inventory over the past few years has been foreclosures and short sales. Are they still a significant part of the inventory?
Not a significant part anymore. And you're right. As a whole, I think 2 years ago, something statewide, I think it was 45 or 50% of the sales were distressed properties. I think it's dropped down to about 20% or maybe less than that here in the desert this last year. They're still come along, and that kind of continues to hold down prices to some extent. In the single-family home market, mostly what we're seeing now are short sales, and they're getting fewer and farther between.
Now, I've heard that short sales are quite a lengthy process.
They can be. The banks have really improved the process. The last one I did here in Monterey Country Club, we had an acceptance from the bank within about 2 weeks, and closed the transaction start to finish in about 40 days. So not that much different than a standard sale. It
really?
All depends on the situation, and it can be more complex. If a seller has a first and a second on the property, and the second is with a different lender, that can cause issues. But the last one I did was very, very smooth. And I hear the same thing. They're getting much more responsive, the banks are. Really?
Now, you mentioned, and maybe I misunderstood what you said, but the country club communities have fewer short sales than single residences, single family residences?
No, we're just seeing fewer in the last year than we did previously.
Okay.
And I don't think I think country club communities are probably have just had just as many short sales and foreclosures as single-family home developments.
Right.
One thing in so many of the condominium communities or older communities, while so many of the developments that were built in the early to mid 2000s had a lot of first-time buyers that were really unqualified, and those were the people who really got into trouble when the financial difficulties came about. And so I think that the number of foreclosures, the number of distressed sales in those newer developments were a lot higher at one time.
Right.
But than in the country club communities.
Now, what are the differences between selling or buying or selling in the country club community versus a single family residence?
Well, probably the biggest difference is most of the country club communities are in a homeowners association. A lot of people will take a glance at a listing information sheet and see a figure of $500 or $600 per month for HOA dues, and say that's ridiculous. We're looking for something less expensive. Many of the single-family homes do have homeowners associations, but many times they're responsible only for the streets, and if they are gated, the gates and a limited amount of common area, while a country club community generally has much more extensive common area, common swimming pools, not only gates, but many times 24-hour guarded gates. And also many of the country club communities are condominiums. So the homeowners association is also responsible for the maintenance of the exterior of the buildings, the roofs, all of the landscape, right up to the patios. So many times people think that an HOA fee in a country club community is expensive. They go out and buy a single-family home with a less expensive HOA, and then immediately turn around and spend $120 a month on a gardener and another $100 a month on a pool service. Plus, they're paying for homeowners insurance, fire insurance, which is covered in an HOA if they're condominiums. So it really kind of trading dollars. Many times also the HOA in a country club community will have negotiated a contract with cable. So basic cables included in your HOA fees. Trash collection is often included. So those are the major differences. Of course, there's also CC&Rs. There are regulations and restrictions in a country club community about the color of your exterior, keeping your garage doors closed, timely trash can placement. Now, there's lots of restrictions that people need to be aware of. And that's one thing that any good agent will educate a buyer on. And also in California, at least, any buyer does receive a complete set of HOA disclosures during the escrow process to review, to make sure, first of all, that the HOA is solvent, which is could always be a concern because of the past of the number of distressed properties.
Right. Now, with all that said, you would still recommend buying within a gated community?
I would. And so many buyers, like I said, these are second homes. You can lock it and leave it, and not really be concerned. They have good security. The exterior is maintained. The landscape is maintained. So it's a lot of peace of mind. You're not really concerned. You get to know your neighbors, and they know you. And I think, having lived in both types of situations, I lived in La Quinta in a single-family home development for 5 years. And the biggest difference I noticed is I'd wave at my neighbors when they left for work in the morning. They'd wave at me. I'd see them when they come home. We'd wave. They'd pull into the garage. The door would close, and I'd see them the next day. In a country club community, you get to, it seems to, like, to me, like you get to know your neighbors a lot better.
Okay. Because you do activities together, or
activities, and also the nature of the beast, the open space around. Usually there are not fenced yards. Your backyard is a golf fairway, and so you see your neighbor on their patio next to you or across the fairway from you. You just see more of each other and interact more in a country club community.
Interesting. I'd never thought about that. Is there a difference in the process of buying a home between buying a primary versus a secondary residence?
If you're getting a loan, there's some slight difference. The requirements are a little stricter on a second home, usually a slightly higher down payment. Your interest rate is usually slightly higher. But as far as anything else, no, not really.
Not really. Pretty much they're the same. And do you have a number of? Do you have a number of clients buying with cash?
Probably the majority of clients, at least at Monterey Country Club, where I primarily sell, are cash buyers.
Wow.
And part of that is we've had, and it's not just Monterey Country Club, throughout the desert, throughout the Southwest, we've had a tremendous influx of Canadian buyers the last 4 or 5 years. Their dollar is much stronger than it was. At one point it was like 60 cents to our dollar. Now it's over parity. Their dollar is worth more than ours. So real estate to them is a bargain now. So a lot of the longtime snowbird renters have become snowbird buyers in the last 4 or 5 years. And really it pretty much saved real estate in the desert. Even though price from the high in 2006 to the low in 2011 was probably a reduction of value of over 40 to maybe 45%. It could have been much worse if it weren't for the Canadians.
Really?
Yep.
And they didn't have a comparable property crisis that we had?
Not anything nearly as bad as ours. And right. So many of our buyers are from Western Canada. A lot of oil, a lot of energy resources there, and really Western Canada, the economy has been booming the last 2 to 3 years.
Guess we should be looking at investing in Western Canada.
Now is not the time.
Wait for their
They
lull.
were down here investing at the right time.
Exactly. They're one up on us.
Definitely now. But everything comes around, so we'll
right.
see what happens 10 years from now.
Right. If we live to see it, we'll see what happens 10 years from now. So what is the number one thing clients don't ask about the homes they're buying that they should ask?
Oh, now you've stumped me.
Now I stumped you. I promise I'm going to stump you.
What don't they ask that they should ask? Well, a good agent normally doesn't allow that to happen. In other words, you do your best to educate a client. You certainly want to make sure that a client is aware of the difference between leased land and fee land, and most seem to be. In the desert here, we have a number of areas of Indian-owned land, and
right.
where you don't actually own the land; it's on a lease to the Indian tribes. Certainly in Palm Springs and portions of Rancho Mirage, that's the case. So that's something that every buyer needs to be aware of. And most ask, though, even if you're selling a property in La Quinta, you get questioned all the time as to whether you own the land or if it's leased land. And almost all the land in La Quinta, to my knowledge, is fee land. You own it. Other things they should ask about are the HOA. We talked briefly about what HOAs, and I made just a quick mention about the financial stability of an HOA. A buyer should always ask if there have been any assessments within the last 5 years. There have been a few developments where they've ran into some major issues with roofs or some other situation where they've had to assess the owners. And you also want to make sure that they're aware of the HOA reserves. I don't think there's probably an HOA in the desert that has the reserves that they would like to have, but some are much stronger than others. Right. And with the number of distressed properties we've seen over the last 5 or 6 years, some of the smaller HOAs could, and I stress could, have been affected a little more than the larger HOAs. In a 20-home development, if 5 or 6 of those homes go into foreclosure, that's a significant income loss to the homeowners association. So those are the things buyers need to make sure they understand and make sure they ask about, I think.
Right. Interesting. So you need to know that the property that you're on and the people that you're paying are solvent and can have the reserves to pay for what they owe.
And you know, to be honest, to be fair, you understand that the buyer will receive full disclosure during escrow. However, that's the time after you've fallen in love with the home and put a down payment or a earnest money deposit in. You spend a lot of time, signed a lot of paperwork before you even get to that point, where you could probably save yourself, you know, some disappointment at least if you've got those questions, at least in general, if your agent can get those answers to you, or at least point you in the direction to get the answers before you get to the point of discovering something you weren't aware of 15 or 20 days before the close of escrow is scheduled.
Right, because I mean, from personal experience, I just find that when you're going through title and you have all this paperwork thrown at you, you really need to know what the most important pieces of it are, because
exactly.
I don't read every line.
Can be 300 or 400 pages, and,
right.
and you know, I've done hundreds of transactions, and I have to admit that I've probably only read all 300 or 400 pages one time in the last 6 or 7 years in one development. So yeah, you need to pay attention, and you need to know what questions to ask and what documents to make sure and review carefully.
Right. And as an agent, that you help with that.
You help with that. You know, you certainly don't want to be liable but you do point them in the right direction. You tell them that to read this particular section and make sure they understand that if there is anything that you question as an agent, and there usually isn't. Right.
Well, this has been really informative. Now, do you do properties outside of country clubs, or do you do strictly inside country club properties?
No, I do both. You know, so often you'll start with a buyer who's convinced they want to live not just in a country club, but a specific country club. but after spending, a day with them, looking at properties and discussing the pros and cons of what they see, quite often we'll end up in a whole different either development or a whole different type of community. And we may start at one end of the valley, and before they actually make an offer, we're clear at the other end in a single-family home development, for instance. So
right.
you never know what you end up. I specialize primarily in golf course communities, but I can't tell you the number of buyers I've worked with over the years where that's where we started, and we've ended up in a single-family home development for one reason or another.
I understand. Well, Tim, thank you so much for being on the show. If our listeners want to learn more about you or get in contact with you, how can they go about doing that?
Well, you can call me direct here in the desert in Monterey, in Palm Desert, at Monterey Country Club, 760-391-2582. Or you can look me up online at www.montereyccresales.com.
Excellent. This has been really informative. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Happy to do it, Melanie. Thank you.
You're welcome.